Hey everybody, we're just going to give everybody a minute or two to filter in here as Zoom lets everybody in. And as we as everybody filters in, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to know where people are dialing in from in the world. If you want to drop, city, state, country into the chat, would love to see where everybody's coming in from. All right. Canada, hey, Delara, Brooklyn, Portland, Oregon, up by Prem, Atlanta, Georgia, Sacramento, Dallas, Melbourne, of course. India, thanks for staying up late with us. Tacoma, Richmond, Virginia, frosty, Western Pennsylvania. Oh, I bet you it is frosty. Yeah, I'm up in Boston. We're getting probably the snow that you guys just got. Mobile, Alabama, Moton, PA. Wow, a lot of Pennsylvania. I like this. My in-laws are actually up from York, Pennsylvania this week. Orem, Utah, North Texas, Lisbon. I bet you it's not frosty in Lisbon. Augusta, it probably is frosty in. More Pennsylvania. Amazing. Alaska. All right. Sunny in Vegas. Of course it is. Not so much out here. I flipped the camera around, but it would just be too depressing. Um, Amazing. Seattle, Washington. Of course, Jason. Houston, Texas. Kelly, nice to see you. Jen, Natalie. Awesome, everybody. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And the first thing I actually wanted to do is just let you know if you're in talent acquisition and you're interested in artificial intelligence and how this paradigm shift is going to impact the way that folks are recruited and want to learn really specific insights and tools and tactics about how you can leverage these tools in your job, you're in the right place. And even beyond that, we're going to be talking about AI agents today, but we're also going to be talking about some of the dangers and pitfalls of using this technology too. It's not all, hey, let's go, go, go. We want to be thoughtful about this. We want to make sure we're using it in the most effective and compliant ways as well. We're going to have an engaging and interactive discussion throughout the next hour or so. We're going to have a bunch of polls. We're going to have some giveaways, some abilities to earn some gift cards and other prizes. We're going to do speed networking about halfway through this, which is always my favorite part of these webinars, which we do every single month. People can just sort of network with others who are on the horn, who have an interest in this topic specifically. I'll get into some quick introductions to kick things off. So my name's Phil Strazzulla. If we haven't met previously, I'm the founder of SelectSoftware Reviews. So our North Star is helping HR and talent acquisition professionals find and buy the right software. Around 100,000 companies a month use our reviews. They also use our staff. You can book a one-on-one call with somebody on our team who's an expert in the thing that you care about. Maybe that's AI tools, maybe that's applicant tracking systems, HRIS, whatever it is. And we'll give you bespoke advice about what vendors you should be looking at, the prices you should be paying. And we do that all completely free of charge. With me today is an expert in AI recruiting before it was cool. Been doing this, since even pre-ChatGPT. Prem Kumar is the CEO and co-founder of Humanly, which is a venture-backed generative AI platform that empowers hiring teams to have more effective and equitable job candidate conversations. He previously led project management and design teams at Tiny Pulse, an employee engagement company I'm sure many of you are familiar with, focused on real-time people data for building world-class cultures in organizations. And a little bit more about Humanly, and thanks, Kareem, for being with us, because I'm super excited to learn from you kind of on a general level, how is AI changing talent acquisition landscape? What can people do? And then we're actually going to get a quick demo of some of the voice features that people are using and the other automation that folks are leveraging today to do their jobs better. So Humanly, it's an AI-powered recruiting solution to source, attract, screen, schedule, and convert candidates at scale. It helps recruiting teams and talent acquisition professionals streamline their workflows. The platform is also very candidate centric, which I think is extremely important. It's not all about machines. At the end of the day, we're all humans. And today, Human Lead, very aptly named, is offering a gift card for all attendees if they book a discovery call with the Human Lead team to learn how you can use this AI-powered platform to streamline your hiring process. And we'll have a link in a little bit. We'll drop into the chat if you want to book a time with the Human Lead team to learn more about this tool. But the awesome thing is that Prem's going to actually give us a little bit of a demo here in a couple of minutes. Before we get started, I also want to just quickly launch a poll to get a feel for the folks on the phone. How familiar are you with artificial intelligence and how this new paradigm is sort of changing the game in talent acquisition? And this will help us frame the conversation to make it the most valuable for you all. So that's going to pop up here in a minute or two. And while we're doing that poll, I'm also going to just highlight that the session recording, and thanks, David, you can also you can drop in the chat at any time whatever comment that you want, including an answer to the question or a question. We love fielding questions throughout these conversations that we have. But this is going to be recorded, and this is also approved for 1 credit towards HRCI or SHRM accreditation. So just keep an eye on your inbox if you want to share this or you want to reference it in the future. And if you are looking for those credits, this will count towards that as well. So I guess, Prem, to kick things off, I would love to hear more about how companies are right now incorporating AI agents sort of into their org chart, and how are they leveraging these in talent acquisition right now?
Yep. Well, first off, thanks for the great intro, Phil. That was better than I could have done myself, so I will take some notes. Yeah, no, I've been in the AI for HR and recruiting tech space for about 19 years now, and have definitely seen a lot of manifestations of this. So before at Tiny Pulse, I was in charge of our global HR portal at Microsoft, and we went through a lot of things as it related to our workforce and the customers. So it's definitely a hot topic. The question you just asked. I'll start by saying, I think we all feel this way, but to say it again, these technologies are not going to replace people, but recruiters that use them might replace those who do not. And it kind of like, as far as the future org, I do see the role of the CHRO of the future being one of managing, engaging, inspiring, not just human intelligence, but also artificial intelligence. So you kind of think of these things together. Whenever I think of AI or any technology, it can make things happen faster and more efficiently. We'll give some real examples later. It can also make bad things happen faster and more efficiently bad. So getting this right in your org chart is really important. I think starting with the people and process, I feel recruiting will always be human driven, hence our name. So I think it starts with the people and process. And in our org chart, we have a few AI agents. And, if you're going to add technology or AI to do tasks that maybe humans would have done in the past, I encourage people, to answer your question, to write a job description for the AI. Ask questions that you would interview people with. A lot of us are good at interviewing. So what's the experience and training? What data is it trained on? What's the AI's background? What use cases has it done before? What responsibilities does it have now? Will those change? Is the AI a culture add? If the AI is negative to our culture, I would rather pay more for a human that might do it slower if it's going to be a big dip in culture. So it's not all about efficiency and time savings when you're thinking about adding AI to your org chart. And more to that, but I'll keep it at that for now.
I've never thought about is AI a culture ad or not. Can you dive a little bit more into that and how you think about whether or not it is?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess just briefly, I guess how I think about culture is it's certainly an evolving thing. So it's kind of like software of old, you'd install once, cultures of old, you'd have a leader come in, install their culture. But now cultures are more like SaaS software where you're iterating based on feedback from your customers being your employees, your past employees, your future employees. So if we think about culture as non-static like that, having AI come in and perform a particular role, for example, in recruiting tech, speaking to your candidates or even future employees and sharing your employer brand. If it's not doing an amazing job of that, new employees will come in and obviously not be set up and maybe not be matched in the way that you want them to be culturally. And AI could definitely do it if done right. I certainly feel that we actually help. There's many tools that actually help create better cultures. Everything is measurable in many ways now. A lot of our calls are on Zoom, and I think there's ways you can measure, are you showing up? Are you demonstrating your values? And AI can kind of help measure is culture actually helping or not. But yeah, if you bring an AI and maybe you're replacing a specific set of things that we'll take a real example I get here, which might be good. So we're using an AI agent that helps our engineers learn about our code base. So if there's a new engineer that comes in, it would take us 3 months for them to be fully integrated from an understanding of code base standpoint. It now takes 1 month, but there could be some gaps there where now the engineers have the knowledge in 1 month, but are they fully onboarded into the cultural elements of how you actually go about proposing a code change or working with the team to get what you need? So AI answering the questions gets them the right data, but it might do that in a way where they're not actually as onboarded as they would have been if it was a human doing it. So that's a cost benefit that you have to weigh.
I appreciate everybody who are putting their LinkedIn URLs into the chat. Can you please hold off on that for about 15 minutes? And then we're actually going to have a networking power hour where everybody can do that who is interested. But I think in the short term, it's potentially a little bit distracting. If you don't mind just kind of holding off there for a few minutes. Um, Prem, I wanted to dive in a little bit into, so like you have this AI agent. How did you create it and train it, and how hard was it? And if I'm a TA leader, how do I think about, do I want to create one of these things, and maybe what are one or two initial use cases?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's and I can start by defining agents. So I think it, on a technical sense, like generally when people are talking about agents on LinkedIn and whatnot, it's a little bit different definition, but really it's a piece of technology that performs a very specific task and can learn to do those tasks better. And when you kind of combine agents, then you can talk about, hey, can I have an agent as my executive assistant? So when we think about agents as fulfilling a job role, usually it's kind of a combination of agents. I guess as far as like choosing if you want to build them or not, one thing I'll say too is on the culture side, going back to the point of not replacing people, where the number one reason why people want to work at Humanly or want to work at other companies of our size is often the impact they want to create. And AI really helps you make that impact. It can be 10x, 50x. So if you look at it like that, where it's making everyone be able to have a much larger outsized impact versus replacing. I think that's important. But to answer your question, and I can also talk about if you're looking at vendors, what questions to ask them. But if you're looking to build in-house, we built a lot of things in-house at Microsoft. And obviously at Humanly, we have a few. Generally, you can kind of think of like, let's just take Chat GPT or a chat scenario. So you can look at that as a very well-read but somewhat naive person that has read everything on the internet. The internet itself is a somewhat biased resource, but it doesn't know anything about you as a company, and it doesn't usually know about the workflow piece. So I think anything we bring in, if it's not like integrated into an ATS or HRIS system, into our email, it basically doesn't exist. If it's not integrated, it's not part of your workflow, it doesn't exist. It kind of just sits out to the side. So I think that's one consideration as you're bringing these things in, whether you're building them or not. Is it actually built into how you're working and not making you have to work in a completely new way? So that's one thing I would say. And I think that LLMs and these agentic architectures have made it a lot easier to build on top of, but it's really your data and your use case that makes these things powerful. It's what it's the difference between something that's good at talking to a human. My 9-year-old son can talk to a human, but to actually interview a human and ask the right questions, and if the candidate asks about pay, knowing that they're in Colorado. I saw someone here is from Colorado, so knowing the pay transparency laws in Colorado. So to build it in-house, I would not assume you're kind of just taking what's out there and adding some prompts to it, but do you have the data to train it and the ability to integrate it into your existing workflow? If you do, it might be a very great solution to build in-house. If you don't, you can talk to vendors that are doing such things. I'll give one quick example. It's kind of like hiring a human recruiter. So if you have a great recruiting team that can train a human with no recruiting experience to do well, then you might want to hire someone. Then you can hire someone with little experience. But if you don't, you might want to hire someone with a lot of experience. And if you're going to a vendor, they have a lot of data and experience in their agents for your use cases. If you're building in-house, you're going to have to train the agent to do what you want it to do.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you're at Microsoft scale, go crazy, build some agents. You've got, the resources, you've got the scale to sort of amortize that cost across. But for the most part, you're looking at individual vendors. When you're thinking about sort of the benefits or use cases or how this can have a positive impact, are there a couple of core things that this sort of technology can really help me out with?
Yeah, so I think anytime I look at a lot of generative AI and content generation, like writing a job description. I think that was one of the questions someone had sent in before. I look at AI as great at creating a really strong draft and then having a human do a quick check. So things like writing a job description. Tools like ours will set up a campaign for you. So if you tell our tool what you want in the job, now you have the emails written, SMSs written, so a campaign that goes out to the candidate that we're using our data to tell you, hey, we think for this role, it's going to convert best if you use this language and talk about this sort of thing.
Mhm.
But yes, writing content like job descriptions, emails, templates for sending SMS to candidates, candidate intake. So particularly in high volume, U.S. companies are spending about $7 billion in processing candidates that come inbound and reading resumes, but they're still only getting to about 5% of the candidates that are coming in. It's kind of like, and I apologize for the person that mentioned that we didn't respond to that demo request, because it's kind of like the example there is if we had 100 people that wanted to demo our product and we just had the sales team to engage with 2% of them, that would be a sales failure. And that's kind of what's happening now. You have a bunch of candidates raising their hand that want to get engaged, but it's impossible to have conversations with all of them at scale. AI can help you do that. So engaging with everyone in interest in your employer brand, using things like chatbot or voice to get all of them in a two-way conversation in minutes. So you're not just screening the candidates, but they're screening the company so they don't ghost or drop off later. So that engagement at scale is another scenario, even like passive candidates, silver medalist candidates. So there's a question I saw around interviewing. So that another example I'll give, and I'll stop there. But just getting better at interviewing. So I found that I speak too quickly, which disadvantages candidates where English is a second language and other candidates as well. With a lot of things happening on Zoom, what some of this doesn't even require AI, but we can basically measure everything, and you can't really change what you're not adequately measuring. So I think measuring, automating creation of content, and quality of content, and then engaging at scale are three use cases. And I'm happy to name some tools and helpful links for those sort of use cases as well.
That's awesome. I think in general, it seems like it's just a huge augmentation of what you're doing currently, and taking some work off your plate, sort of rough drafting a lot of stuff and allowing you just more time and headspace. And what I found, at least with the AI tools that we use, is like it turns out you always have something else to do. That's the good news, right? It's like you're taking this off my plate so I can like get to that thing, that bigger project, that strategic project, or I'm just being much more efficient at my job.
Yeah. And I one thing that I'll put in there, Phil, and I think that's one problem that I'm seeing with a lot of AI vendors right now is there's a big message around saving time and automating everything, which really is a great use case, but we're not then saying, okay, and here's what you can now do with that time. So I think painting the picture around what the full workload looks like across human and AI is important for all of us to think about strategically.
Um, I think Krista just asked a really interesting question, and then we'll get to the networking around candidates' receptivity to talking to an AI, whether that it sounds like we're going to do a demo of a voice agent, there's chat agents. What have you found?
Yeah, so Chris, a really great question. And when I was first pitching to this idea to investors 5 years ago, I was hit hard with this question. And so a couple of things I'll say. One thing I'll say, particularly in high volume, it's not a choice between it's usually not a choice between talking to a human and a chat agent. It's a choice between talking to a chat agent and being ignored, or waiting a week or two to get to an interview. And I think in getting this right. So we have all candidates rate their experiences with our chat. The average is about 4.8 out of 5. And I think in getting there, there's a couple things. One is it actually has to work. So you can't be like typing a question and getting some horrible answer. Second is I've never felt that chatbots were about chatting. It's more about transacting and getting you to the next step. So
Mm.
can you get the candidate to the next step, which might not always be scheduling them with a human. Maybe they're not a good fit. But can tools like ours provide an outcome for every candidate? Whether that is, here are some other jobs that might be a good fit, or we think you might be good. If you finish this, we'll reach out in 3 months if you finish this certification, but not just leave them hanging. So I think if you can get that right and get them to some sort of step, and there's like littler things that you can do from an experience standpoint, but I do think that that is important. And then the last piece is letting them screen the company. So we have, there's a lot of problems with ghosting and drop off. And sometimes when I talk to our customers and when we survey our customers, it's simple things that they just didn't realize earlier. And sometimes it's because they found another job, but can you use the agent to push your employer brand, and not just like say curated things, but identify over time. One of our customers, we found when the chat talks about this topic versus this topic in employer brand, it's going to get a higher conversion. So talking about the things that matter and also answering candidates' questions about the company. So I think if you can give value back to the candidate, that's how you get a 4.8 out of 5.
Yeah, and that rating sort of speaks for itself. And I think my initial skepticism is, well, does the candidate understand that the trade-off is this or nothing? but they do because they're applying to other jobs, right? And you're differentiating yourself relative to your talent competition
Yep.
with sort of solution. Um,
Yeah.
with that, I want to, and thank you everybody for your patience in the networking aspect of things. I'm going to drop my LinkedIn URL into the chat. If anybody wants to connect, please do. And if anybody else wants to connect with other people on this chat, other talent acquisition folks interested in AI technologies, please feel free to drop your LinkedIn URL into the chat, sort of an open invitation to those on the call to connect with you. If you want to do that, learn from others. We've had some great connections from these webinars. Encourage you to do that. We'll also be launching a poll here in a second that, again, allows us to a little bit better understand who is here on the call and therefore how should we tailor the second half of our conversation here. So if you wouldn't mind filling out that as well, we would love to learn more about all the people on the call. And thank you so much also for the questions, comments, insights in the chat. Bob, who is an AI expert, I see is answering some questions, and it's always cool. I think this always happens on our webinars, but it still is fun whenever it does, where we're learning from people in the chat, in addition to the people on the screen. So thank you guys so much for keeping it vibrant. Um, with that, we started maybe touching on the outskirts of this question, but I am wondering how you think about uh basically like the ROI of using AI solutions in talent acquisition. And perhaps it's the answer to that question of like, what do you do with your extra time? Or maybe in a larger organization, it's, efficiency of a given recruiter. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about how your frameworks.
Yeah, and if I may, I might also, I realized I didn't answer the second part of Kristen's question, and there's some other interesting commentary there in the chat. So I'll just briefly do that and then get into ROI. So there was a question around, does the candidate know they're talking to a bot? So we very much, and not everyone's like this. I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but I very much believe candidates should know if they're talking to technology or a human. We're not in the business of trying to trick people. And that's not a metric for us. Like I've seen some people pitch, hey, 80% of people thought they were talking to a human. We want you to know you're talking to technology, and it should speak for itself if it's solving your problem or not. And the question around missing candidates. So with our approach, I would look at if you're using keywords to filter and sort. I don't believe that to be AI matching, and I think that is a problem. That's a shortcut, and I think not like I'm saying if you're using like a technology that's just looking at keywords or what candidates said in their words and then filtering them based on them. I think the problem right now is amazing recruiters just don't have time to talk to 4,000 people. But if you want to get the best, not just person for the role, but the best pipeline for future roles, you probably want to talk to everyone. So we're really using shortcuts to be able to make the list smaller, and any tools that are basically extending those shortcuts like keywords to try and do the same thing, but just do it at a broader scale, I think are missing the point in being able to evaluate a full candidate for who they are. ROI, Phil. I will get back. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of forms of this, and I think the buckets are like I'd kind of look at ROI inside of the attraction space, efficiency and quality of process, cost, candidate experience. I could definitely get into more details in all of those, but generally what people come to us for is, can we, one is reducing time to hire, where we're able to get it to about 1/5. But when I think of it as in a context of when I started at Microsoft, I was in a support role, and we had a lot of folks coming to us because MSN was having issues. I don't know if anyone's using MSN anymore, but at the time. And what we found is that to produce the highest satisfaction with angry user, and candidates are not angry, but this was an extreme case. It wasn't just like time to resolution. It wasn't just how fast we could do it. Time to hire is a very important metric from a cost standpoint, but from the experience standpoint, time to first touch had a disproportionate impact on their experience. So if you get to them right away, and I'm talking like seconds after they apply, you have a better chance of creating a good candidate experience. But I do think time to hire and ROI around that is important. Time to apply. Can you make this less cumbersome? Even simple things like if you're using a different tool for chatbot versus SMS versus ATS versus video interview, candidates might feel like they're interviewing at like a bunch of different companies. They might have to retype things, or then the hiring manager comes in and asks some things that the chatbot already asked. So, I believe in a world where there's like one technology you're using for all the communication with candidates. Candidate experience, obviously, is something that all of us care about. To me, that is quantifiable and measurable. And can you actually measure that at each point in time, each stage, instead of more overall? So experience in screening, experience in the next stage. So I think that's another kind of quantifiable ROI, but really the main ROI that our customers come to us for, and it might be different. I'm excited to hear what others say is really around cost savings, time savings, time to hire. And someone had asked a question in the questions that were sent ahead around staffing firms. So on that side of the house, if you're not an in-house team, speed is looked at a little differently, time to fill, and cost per hire, retention rate. All of these things are important. And I think the other measure, I'll leave it at this, but ultimately what we're looking to do is not just have a role filled, but have a role filled with a person that's going to create the best impact at the company. When I was back at Microsoft back then, we were very much looking at attrition, turnover. Having high performers leave is a bad thing, obviously, but what's worse is having a reluctant stayer. And I think if we can measure employee lifetime value, which is a combination of tenure, performance, engagement, how fast they onboarded, then we're able to take that back and use the AI to say, okay, these folks with these skills, not necessarily with these degrees, but with these skills, have the highest chance to have the highest employee lifetime value at our company. That to me is a really good overall kind of ROI. But right now, I think the here and now is, can we save time? Can we save money and create a good candidate experience?
I love how you are straddling the super analytical, thinking about the candidate pipeline, conversion rates, time to first interaction, how that impacts conversion, the different aspects of employer brand, as you mentioned earlier, and how that impacts conversion with the human part of it, right? Which is the brand that you guys have built around that. This isn't just the machine and numbers in a spreadsheet. This is actually, people looking for a job or people trying to build a culture, build a company. And I think it's extremely important, and it's unique to find it in one sort of business or entity that is doing this stuff. I'm wondering, on the flip side of the benefits and the use cases and the ROI, what are the dangers here? Like,
Yeah.
what are the things that we need to be aware of? It's not all rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. And AI is not always the best solution. Automation is not always the best solution. Sometimes humans are better. So a couple of things I'll say is, I think it always starts with the problem you're trying to solve. And vendors like us are not here to, like, I want to learn as much as I possibly can and be obsessed with the problem, not be obsessed with the solution, which is AI. Like, I definitely know a lot about AI, but it's just starting with the problem. And I'm guessing there are many people on this webinar that know the problem space very well, more so than the actual certainly more than the actual technological vendors. So I think just making sure you're using that and really identifying, okay, here's like specifically what we're trying to solve, is really, really important. And really, like, the future of AI is not what I dream up. It's what you vote for via your software purchasing decisions. And AI has like made companies like us more so able. SaaS did this to a degree, but now AI has made this even more so, where we're sitting on the same side of the table as you, and building something that works for you and your company. So I think that's the attitude that vendors need to have. But with that said, Phil, yeah, there's definitely dangers for sure. When you scale your opportunity to save time, you're also scaling your risk. If you are having a chatbot talking to your job candidates that's thinly built on an LLM, the LLM is its knowledge base is the internet, which is a pretty biased source. About 70% of the pages on the internet were written by a particular demographic of English native speakers. And the second most common is about 6%. So you basically have a smaller group of people in the world that have created the brain of the LLM, which could lead to bias. So I think bias is one important thing to think about. And asking vendors the right questions. So I do, we have like a list of questions you can ask vendors, and I'm happy to go through a few, but if it's doing the job of a human, you kind of want to interview it like a human. So is it going to hurt our culture? If it does well, are we going to compensate it more? What's its background? So what use cases has it done before? Going back to what you were saying, Phil, around building versus buying. If this AI hasn't done your roles and your types of thing, your particular industry considerations, if it doesn't have experience in that, it's probably not going to be better than what you can generically build. I would also ask any vendor, are they audited? So the laws right now are, well, kind of, I would say behind. And there's a lot of state level things. We're very conservative, so we'll usually look to the EU. But like audits to me are pretty important. So are these vendors audited? Can they produce an audit report similarly to how your IT team might ask for a SOC 2 Type 2 or ISO report? Same thing for AI. Do they have an audit report? Have they shown, is there bias in the system? Did they fix it if there was? So I think that's also another, I should say, a third party audit. If they're auditing themselves, and that's obviously not as great. So those are some of the things, but again, I would start with the people. I would look at your process and say, okay, what is the goal? Maybe it's we want to save money and we want a good candidate experience. If we look at the whole candidate journey, what are the opportunities within that we can perhaps provide automation? And then on the back end, can you measure that? Can you actually measure that AI doing pre-screen? There's actually a slide I can maybe send out in a follow-up, but where we're actually showing to a customer for this step, the chatbot is here's its level of empathy compared to a human. Here's the level of being able to display employer brand versus a human. And it's not going to be better at all of those things at every stage, but perhaps the initial stages.
Super fascinating. We're getting a couple of questions in here about, it sounds like proactive talent sourcing effectively. And I think we'll probably address that in the demo of Humanly, which we're going to get to in about 2 minutes. And I'm super excited to see the tool in action, because we've been talking about a lot of things, and the way my brain works, I'm like, I need to see it, right? I need to see this kind of solution in action. I wanted to bring up one thing prior to that, and we're going to launch a short poll here in a second. But we spend at my business all day long trying to understand these different technology landscapes, specifically within talent acquisition and HR, HRISs, applicant tracking, et cetera. And we've got a whole team of researchers that keep this data together. And we have a team of advisors that people can connect with. And so in general, we find buying tools is really important. It's also really time consuming. And so anybody on the call, I highly recommend, if you're looking for a new applicant tracking system, an HRIS, you've got employees abroad, you're doing an EOR, et cetera, click yes in this poll, and we'll have somebody follow up with you. I'm also going to put a link into the chat here if you want to book a time directly with our advisor now. There's a giveaway, I believe we'll buy your team lunch, which effectively translates into we'll give you a gift card that you can spend on whatever you want. But if you book a call with our advisor throughout this webinar through that link I just shared, we'll send you that gift card as a thank you. And basically, the way it works is connect with us. We'll learn more about your business. We'll give you recommendations on vendors you should be looking at. And then throughout the software selection process, you've got questions. We've usually got answers. We've got a lot of data that our research team collects, and then we're helping hundreds of teams a month select software so we understand pricing and all that stuff that really matters. So if you're in that process, please let us help. And we've got a 4.9 star rating too on this service. So we're really proud of it, and we love helping out the community. With that, I would love to jump in and see Humanly in action and get a feel for the sort of nitty gritty on what these tools can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw several questions, as you alluded to, Phil, around proactive sourcing, searching for candidates, finding those diamond in the rough candidates. So I didn't go into that a whole lot because the demo's more focused on that side of the house. So we'll go into that. And as I'm talking through this, I'm also going to share what else is going on outside of Humanly, what other tools you can look at for some of these things. So let me know when you can see my screen. So.
Got it.
Okay, cool. So you should have my mobile phone on the right. I can kind of show you the candidate experience alongside. And I'll specifically speak to where AI comes into play. So what I've done here, so this is a job search in our tool, and basically I've already created, just for the interest of time here, I've already created a job. What you do when you create a job is you can either just upload a job description, have it sync from your ATS, or you can talk to our chat and tell us what's important to you. But there's a couple things you'll see here. So these are example profiles that this particular search is for a marketing leader. So these are example profiles that we are suggesting to you because they're past candidates that have made it either because they've been hired for this role at your company, or they've made it far in process, or they've done so at other companies in our database. And we have about 600 million candidates in our database. You can even remove these if you just say, I want, and obviously being careful with this from a bias standpoint, but if you say, I want more people like Phil, just paste in Phil's LinkedIn profile. So now what we've created for you is a set of candidates, but also all the emails that would go out to them, responses, and a campaign to get out to them, knowing things like, if you're trying to convert a candidate like Julia, you might want to talk about these things. So they're already created in the campaign. So what you have here is you have this section, which is inbound. So it's people that are in your ATS, or maybe you've talked to in the past. A big part of this to me, if you're creating a pipeline, is getting value out of who's already in your ATS. You might have met the perfect person already. So we have tools, which I won't demo here, but that re-engage with folks and check in on them. But this is, so you put in a job description, you put in a few people, or let the system put in a few people that you think are examples of great hires. We then will give you what match against what's in your ATS. We'll match against your referral network. So if your employees have added their LinkedIn, maybe it looks like Dan and Lindsay at our company know Justin. So I can ask them to request me to intro Justin if he's someone I want to talk to. You have applicants. This is basically just taking people that come in inbound. Recommended from our large database, and then likely to respond. So likely to respond means that we've seen that they're have applied to other roles or are active right now. So you have your list, and I'm just keeping an eye on time. So the important thing here is there's a lot of sourcing tools that will do filtering. One thing we have is we don't just have data on the candidates that is more updated than what you would find on LinkedIn, because we're keeping in touch with them. but you also have data on the company. So if you want to say, I want people, but I want to make sure they have experience working at a Series A startup. I want to check their tenure levels. I want them to work at companies that are growing very fast. This requires data about the company, so you can kind of imagine someone working at Uber now is probably has a different set of skills than someone working at Uber when there were 5 people. So that allows you to kind of think about that. And one thing we don't have now, but we want where we want to go is, if you're hiring for a salesperson and this person's going to do a lot of outbounding, they don't have a lot of marketing support. I want to be able to do a search that says, I want sales folks in Seattle that have worked on teams that are generally sales teams that are generally about 5 people, but they do not have a big marketing team that's supporting them. So I think the more we're able to learn about the company, helps us in these sourcing efforts. So I'll kind of continue down here. So you've had a job that's synced with your ATS. You now have like a list. So now you want to engage these folks, and there's ways of making this more autonomous. There's ways of not. So we've written the email for you. You can edit it, but based on a few things. One is it's based on the job description. We have personalized content. So if Phil gets the email, it's going to say something different. I'm aware that we reached out via LinkedIn a while ago, but so there would be a different message. It might say, congratulations on your 1-year anniversary at Airbnb, a level of personalization. But I think the important part here is kind of what happens next. So everyone's got an email. There's a lot of tools that will email folks. One thing about Humanly is we are in a bunch of different channels. So SMS is another thing. But what happens is when they reply, we're diagnosing with sentiment if it's a positive or negative response. So you can kind of set up, what do you want to happen if they reply positively? What do you want to happen if they reply negatively? And they could, and the next step to us is really important. So it's one thing to get a message out, even if they're a bunch of great candidates, to get a message out. It's another thing to get a message out that's written in a way that we think will convert. But then the next step is converting them. So there's a lot of drop off traditionally here. So what you can do is you can insert one of our chats. You can insert a link to take them right into a voice phone screen. You can insert a chatbot that will just like answer their questions if it's more of a passive thing. So we have kind of a library of these purpose-built chats based on what you're trying to do with the group, what the next step is. I'll quickly take you down an example here. So maybe this is more of like a passive scenario, and so you might link to a chat like this. All of our chats have URLs and can be embedded. So it's not like, it doesn't have to just be a widget on the web page. Whoops. Let me just let me connect my phone.
Hey,
I'm
Prem,
in.
I know we have a bunch of questions to
Oh,
get
yeah,
to it,
yeah, yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
wondering,
Yeah,
I think there's some sort of voice functionality that I was curious
yeah.
to get a quick look at if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. So two things here. Let me just, I'll do this super quick so we can just get to the voice. So there's a couple ways we're incorporating voice. So I'm going to get to the end of this chatbot. I'm just going to fill it out. We have video. They're looking for an assistant manager job. We're pulling questions from the ATS. So it's a dynamic conversation. We have the ability to, whoop, I didn't record anything. Hi there. But yeah, we basically have the ability to grab, like, if you name pronunciation. This can also be used to match people. So if you have fraud where people are pretending to be someone who they aren't and they're sending someone to fill out the chat for themselves, we can identify if it's the same person. But you go through the chat, you're screened, and we can then take you to either I'll go to the voice part, but we could take you to a phone interview if we want to be called. But on the voice part, so I talked a lot about candidate experience. And if you think about this, you're now kind of you've been contacted, you've expressed interest, and you are screened, and then put into the ATS in a specific stage. Let me get my phone off the other piece here is anything Humanly delivers can be delivered in a variety of different channels. So whether it's SMS, voice, email, or even us helping a human prepare, it's the same engine. What we want to give back to candidates is some level of service. So coaching for a particular job, being able to go through a mock interview and be scored on it. So there are some things we're doing here. In the typical use case, this would be either interviewing candidate via voice or answering their questions via voice or chatbot. So in a case like this, you might ask questions. You might say, and this is a demo environment, so there's a little bit of a lag, but you might ask questions like, I just graduated from the University of Washington. I'm looking for an entry-level support job. Are there any such jobs in the Seattle area or companies hiring there? So this is pulling not just from the Humanly database, that's one area, but it is also pulling from the internet at large, because what we're doing is
Several companies in the Seattle
I'll
area are seeking junior IT support professionals,
what we're
including Experis, Boeing IMAX Theater.
and I'll kind of cut it off, but what it does is it answers the question. It pulls from the internet, so it's not just telling you about the jobs that Humanly has. But where it gets interesting for us is then if you say something that is a little bit more that a generic type scenario wouldn't give you the right answer. And I'll tell you how this works. But let's just say you like the jobs they just suggested, and we want to say something like, and from a company standpoint, when we sell this, right now this is in beta, but when we sell this, you can have this just plugged into your ATS and on your career page. So it could only speak to what is specific to your company. But you might say something like, how many years of experience do I need for a job like that, for a junior support engineering job? So what this is doing is it's looking at all the past candidates that have gone through our systems and have had success. Whoop, I was in the wrong tab. Sorry, I was in the interview tab. I was doing a mock interview. Let me ask that again. I should be in the career coaching tab. How many years of experience do I need for a junior support type role? So we're looking at all the candidates that have had success and been hired in those roles, augmenting that with what is open on the web, and then giving you an answer.
Most employers look for candidates with 0 to 2 years
Awesome.
of experience.
I'm going to put, just because we are running short on time, if you want to get a demo of Humanly and see kind of the full breadth of offering, because there's obviously a lot here, just click the link there. You can book a time and the team will be happy to walk you through and answer any questions that you have. A couple of things here. One is we're going to launch a poll in a second to get any feedback that anybody here has for us on this session. I think there's a question about future sessions that you'd like to see. Helps us do better content for everybody out there. I'm also going to put into the chat here a takeaways doc, which we will actually update with some of the takeaways from today and then send to people through the email. Through the email to your email, so that you have a reference point here for anything that we've discussed on today's call. And in addition to some of the takeaways there's also a bunch of resources that you can leverage. I know some people join these because they're looking for jobs. We run a job board with awesome jobs. Many of them are remote for TA and HR professionals. There's a link to our advisor offering, etc. And all this stuff, of course, is free. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe also if you book a Humanly demo, you're also going to get a gift card. So anybody who clicks on that link, books a demo, you'll get a gift card as well for signing up and learning more about the platform.
Correct. Yep.
Amazing. And I'll just also drop into the chat before we get to the Q&A here, because we've got a lot of really good questions that we'll try to cover quickly. There's a webinar next week about fractional HR that is for anybody who is sort of contemplating using their skill set to start their own business and work across multiple companies. We've got an amazing panel set up there. And then another AI related webinar coming up as well around using AI compliantly and ethically, and really looking at what you have to know from that perspective. So, with all that said, I'd love to jump into some of this Q&A.
Yeah.
And one question that I actually had, I'm going to circumvent all the audience ones. Sorry. What sort of budget do you need, or what sort of scale do you need to start contemplating utilizing one of these solutions?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we're generally targeting mid-sized companies to enterprise. And we do have customers that don't fall in that demographic. There's a lot of different tools that I'm happy to recommend to folks if you're outside of that range in the SMB space. Yeah, generally, and what we could certainly go through pricing, but generally we start at about 15K per year, and then go up depending on the specific use cases that you're using us for. But yeah, there are also a lot of free things one can do. So I'm happy to, if anyone's interested in things that are cheaper than that price point, happy to talk about that. If you're interested in talking to us, obviously you know where to find us.
Awesome. What are some of the biggest roadblocks companies face when integrating this sort of system into recruiting?
So I think like oftentimes trying to do everything at once. So we don't want to, be promising to take you to the top of Mount Everest on a helicopter. We want to be your Sherpa and get you to base camp first. And I think like companies like us are set up to do that, even from a pricing standpoint, because if you're using one of our use cases instead of three of our use cases, it's going to be a much different price. So I think that's one thing I would say comes up a lot, trying to just do it all. And sometimes vendors are promising it all, so it can be hard.
What are your thoughts on candidates using AI during
Yeah.
interviews or during the job search?
Yeah, no, it's certainly a hot topic. I think that the one advantage of having a tool like ours that's in the different channels versus a different tool for SMS, a different tool for emailing candidates, a different tool for your Zoom interviews, is there are ways of identifying, is it the same person? But as far as like the actual job description, if it's a system the systems that are using more simple things like keywords are probably easier to trick. I think candidates are always going to be, I remember when I was in college, there was a lot of people that my classmates would put in keywords in their resumes and put them in white font so you couldn't read them, and they didn't realize that the ATS is going to pull what is in there. So I think that there's always going to be that back and forth, but um, getting a solution that's not just using shortcuts like keywords helps there.
Awesome. We've covered a lot, and I think we've addressed actually a lot of the questions that folks had submitted when they RSVP'd, which I am very appreciative to everybody who submitted a question as well as yourself. Final question, any predictions, 3 to 5 years, sort of where do you think, what might change, what might be unexpected? What's a belief you have that maybe is not as commonly held about AI and recruiting?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the future of AI technologically will go in the exact direction that you all vote for via your purchasing decisions. So I think, being informed, asking the right questions is really important. But yeah, no, I definitely two things. So more immediate future stuff we're doing right now is I do feel right now there should be a single tool for all of these candidate two-way conversations, not a bunch for each. The reason there's a bunch for each is the infrastructure wasn't ready to create SMS at the same time it was to create chatbot. But there should be one, and then your ATS as a system of record. If you go further, I look at for more entry level jobs, you might have more of a jobs find you scenario, and then mid level exec, you need strong humans to recruit for those roles. And I can certainly go on about that. And then one last thing I'll just say in the questions there is, and I can follow up on this as well. But yeah, we have a tool called Voice that sits in on Zoom interviews, and happy to share all our data around what happens in the interview process, bias. We find that if you're a Seattle recruiter is interviewing Seattle candidates, spend 2 minutes more on small talk, which is a disadvantage for candidates. So a lot happening on the human side as well. And bias, I think, is really important to look at there.
That's super fascinating. And I think we all have recognized our own bias at one point or another. And it's interesting to have a tool that actually just gives you the data. It's like, here it is. And
Yep.
it's not super surprising. I want to thank Prem, the Humanly team, for this amazing, insightful conversation, showing us your tool. Thank you, everybody, for attending, for participating in the networking, the polls, the questions. It's all amazing. Sharing your own insights. We'll follow up with the recording, the takeaways, the HRCI, and SHRM credits. Again, if you want to book that call with Humanly, get your $50 gift card. If you need help from advisor, let us know. You want to go on our job board, let us know. And again, we've got those couple of upcoming webinars next week on fractional, amazing panel with a couple of folks who are, one person runs the fractional people group on the internet, another few that are actually like out there doing it, building thriving businesses, and then another the following month about using AI ethically, compliantly, which is going to be another great conversation. So thanks everybody for participation, for helping us spread the word about these webinars, being an awesome participant, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.